we find ourselves here 2 years into the fast start period without any common definition of what counts as climate finance. This is, these are pioneering efforts, but it's fairly stunning that the global community would be at this position. I think it's, we're saying this work is important. It's very important, but I think it's time for some convergence around a positive standard. It seems to me that the standard needs to include not just the categories of things that are reported, but how it's decided what counts. And also that the reporting should ideally be done in the IATI standard, the International Aid Transparency Initiative's standards. It would be great if we can improve the granularity to some of the levels that we've heard about here. But the effort that University of Texas undertook in Malawi is just really a testimony about how poor our information systems are on foreign assistance and even on climate change, which is so new a set of foreign aid. So I'm trying to provoke you all into getting up and asking questions. So stand up and use the microphones, please. We actually are on the web, and I've heard that there might be some questions coming in by the web. I don't know how that's supposed to happen, but if it can, that would be nice. Axel.
Yes, Axel Michaelova from University of Zurich. One sees now the proliferation of initiatives that try to work on reporting and evaluating climate finance. Now, of course, one question that comes from our research where we looked at the creditor reporting system of OECD DAC and found huge inconsistencies in reporting across countries. How would you now see that your initiatives could inform the overarching umbrella of climate finance reporting? So what is your view now in the next 2 years of coordinating these efforts and maybe also influencing OECD in improving their systems and learning from you? What are the next initiatives that you are planning?
Great. Can we take one or two more? Yeah. And if somebody else has one, why don't you get up so we can speed this up a little?
Hi, Dick Morford. Just a quick question on the OECD itself. Does anyone know whether the OECD has agreed to put a marker for climate change adaptation or mitigation in its statistics? I mean, they do markers from time to time.
Yes, there is an adaptation marker which was improved in late November of 2009.
And does that help?
It has not actually been, the results have not been released. It's a simple system. It's 2 is the score for if it's a principal objective of the project. 1 is the score if it's a significant objective, and 0 if it's not climate related. And then there are, of course, some projects that don't end up getting a marker applied to them. So these are supposed to be compulsory now, starting in 2009 for the mitigation marker and 2011 for the adaptation marker. Just as a quick answer. So let's go down the table here. Do people want to talk about this, what Axel raised, the question of how do we create a coordinating effort to, or some sort of a climate finance registry of some sort, whether through the OECD stack system or coordinating with the OECD. So why don't we start down here, or whoever would like to talk about it.
Clearly, for us, I mean, let me just start with what we discovered in the process, what we're doing in the bank, right? One of the reasons why we started with the program that we have is that we're trying to report just on our own activities, and for our donors and stakeholders. And what we discovered was that in terms of climate, our regions, our sectors were all tracking climate, but with different definitions. And so we were getting data even within the World Bank itself, which was not additive, which was not comparable, and which would certainly not be comprehensive if we tried to report it that way. And so that was one of the motivators for developing the system. And we hope to report, at least for the bank, a consistent and comprehensive set of data and indicators on climate finance. We are also working closely with the other MDBs, as I said, on harmonizing systems across the MDBs, and I've shared this with the OECD DAC as well. We have working groups working on these initiatives, and hopefully we will come to and narrow a lot of the uncertainties that exist right now in terms of identifying at least a subset of things that we can all agree on, and a subset where we may have some differences, and those will perpetually exist, given that we have different boards and different mandates and different perspectives on things. But hopefully, we'll be able to narrow the areas where we have differences and also be able to report some of these data more transparently. We have actually worked with some of the bilaterals as well on this. I mean, who have their own systems. I mean, they're waiting. I mean, they're in a wait-and-see mode to see where we end up. And we hope that if we're able to get something going, that it would be more broadly accepted in the community.
Okay.
Much time left here, but I mean, we actually had an all-day workshop yesterday that Axel was at, bringing together many of these groups that are trying to track climate aid within their own organizations to swap ideas. It was one of those first conversations that I think will lead to greater harmonization in the long run. I know from a CCAP's perspective, our goal is to track climate aid across as many donors as possible within countries in Africa. So we're kind of in a position to harmonize in other standards and then apply it to a larger set as a demonstration effect. So, this is actually why we were so pleased to see that our methodology isn't too far off the World Bank, because it's going to make it easier to accomplish that. Although I do have to say we're very envious the World Bank's methodology can actually track budget allocations, which is one of the really big hurdles in consistency in donor reporting, is that kind of budget information isn't readily available for all donors in a way that can be tracked in the same way. So there are certainly hurdles to overcome, but there are many, many initiatives going on. Next week, there's a multilateral development bank working group that actually the World Resources Institute is hosting that conversation. 2 days in a room just hashing out methodologies. That's really where it starts.
Taryn, are you interested?
Yes, I think as a relative newcomer to the aid tracking world, the last couple of days of discussions that we've had in order to exchange experiences and ideas has been very helpful. I think there's an urgent need to have a lot more of those very quickly, just because of the sheer amount of activity that is going on this issue right now. In the MDBs, in the UNFCCC, and in the OECD to develop improved systems. So it's encouraging to see some of that coordination beginning to happen. I think there is a fundamental challenge to overcome with regards to the very different objectives that different institutions bring to their tracking needs, and so 100% identical systems may not meet all of those needs, but I think at least to the extent that we can look to coordinate and make systems mutually compatible, that will be at least a step. One of the issues that I think is challenging is around the definitions, as Timmons was alluding to earlier. If you define and pin down what counts as climate financing for various purposes, then that has huge implications for what you can say about who is delivering on what. The approach that we have tried to take in our initiative is not to adopt a specific definition, but to have transparency and granularity in the data that we collect, so that ideally you would be able to compare data against, for example, a range of new and additional criteria. We hope that can be something that is helpful without being too threatening to actually deliver. So we'll see about that and whether it works. But but I am encouraged by the amount of activity that's happening, and I do think it presents a huge coordination challenge. But I think a lot of people are quite keen to tackle it.
We are running out of time, but I think this does get to some of the core issues that have faced all other sectors of development finance tracking. That is, what's the best way to categorize projects? For example, should it be done at the level of a task manager, at the level of an agency's OECD reporter, the person who's, or other person putting the data into the system? Or should it be done by an independent group, in the case of CCAPs as an example, or we've done some of the SET-aid data. And there's advantages and disadvantages to both types of approaches. And I think that's a very interesting point, Taran, about having just enough information there so that people can decide which bin they want to put it in based on the amount of information that's there. I would argue personally that there needs to be some kind of international standard for the questions of what counts for these pledges that were made, to hopefully create and sustain this trust that was expected to, that was one of the goals of making these really important pledges. There's so much that this foreign assistance on the issue of climate change can do. So much is needed. The estimates of how much money is needed are in the hundreds of billions of dollars, and we hope it materializes. I think for me, it's very important to have these systems in place so that a sort of cynicism doesn't take over, and this sort of donor fatigue capture people, and then this moment of climate change attention pass, because there's going to be a need for much more of this. It's either we transition the global economy to a greener economy or we don't. And with the amount of growth going on in the developing world, it's extremely important. So thanks very much to our panelists. Thank you all for staying. Next, we have a panel on closing the feedback loop, and we hope we stay around. It's going to be some very interesting stuff. Thanks.